Chapter 16 to 20. What's that? Gohan asked, pointing at the sky. For a heart-stopping moment Gine thought maybe the Scions had come early, way early, and they were all about to die, but then she looked up and saw what was definitely not a Scion descending from the sky. Who is that? Chi-Chi asked, shading her eyes. I don't know, Yamcha said, frowning. The figure landed lightly on his toes in front of them. Gine blinked in astonishment. A Namekian? She said under her breath. The newcomer smiled in response. Not just a Namekian, he said. Don't you recognize me, Gine? She only knew 2 Namekians, and one of them wasn't exactly walking around, but the being standing in the swaying wildflowers of the training field was young, and strong, and straight-backed. Still, if you added a bunch of wrinkles and a stoop. Cammy? Gine took a step forward, hoping for a clearer look, and maybe a hug, but to her surprise someone brushed past her and reached the Namekian first. It was Chi-Chi. Eyes blazing, she marched up to him and jabbed a finger in his face, even though he was so tall she had to reach to get it there. You're the reason my Kakarote's gone, she bellowed. Bring him back right now. How dare you show your face here without bringing him with you? Chi-Chi. Yamcha hissed. He ran forward and attempted to drag her away, succeeding only in digging his feet into the ground. That's Cammy. Show more respect. Did he show my marriage respect? Chi-Chi shoved Yamcha away, sending him sprawling, not once taking her eyes off Cammy. Did he show me respect when he took my husband off to who knows where without even consulting me? Who do you think you are? The Guardian of Earth blinked, apparently at a loss. Gine stifled a laugh. Chi-Chi, dear, give him a break. He's probably never been scolded before in his life. With a pointed humph, Chi-Chi spun on her heel and walked away with her nose in the air. Come on, Gohan, she said, leading her son away. Gohan looked back and Gine gave him a wink, which he returned with a grin. Yamcha stood, brushing himself off and muttering. Can't believe, dunno why. Kakarote. Gine went up to the Namekian, searching his face in amazement. Are you really Cammy? She asked. He nodded, smiling. How did you? Is this normal? Cammy chuckled and shook his head. I used the Dragon Balls to wish myself young again. That's a heck of a beauty routine, Krillin said faintly, staring up in awe at the Guardian, who smiled deeper. I thought you could use some help in the upcoming fight, and I wouldn't have been much use otherwise. There was a slightly bitter undertone to his words that no one else noticed, and which Gine wasn't sure she hadn't just imagined. But she watched him a little more carefully from then on, as he settled into their routine and helped them train. Even Chi-Chi eventually came around and let him teach her, though she remained cool to him otherwise. They all improved much faster under his instruction, and for the first time in months Gine began to feel real hope. Still, there was that sense of something unspoken that continued to linger, but it wasn't until she saw him with Gohan one day that she broached the topic. Her grandson was picking flowers, ostensibly for some nature notebook Chi-Chi was having him keep, but probably just because, and he shyly offered one to Cammy, who was meditating nearby. Cammy smiled, grinned really, and accepted the flower, tucking it behind his ear. He looked so carefree, in a way that a deity really shouldn't, and it gave Gine the courage to ask him. What are you really doing here? He glanced up at her, the grin fading but still present. Gine put her hand on Gohan's head as he retreated behind her leg, though he continued to watch the Namekian with wide, curious eyes. I'm here to help you fight, Cammy said, like he knew that wasn't the end of it. But why? Gine pressed. Why do that now? Why not with Piccolo, or if you couldn't fight him yourself, why not do more to help us then? What's different about this threat? Cammy studied her for a long time. You know, when we first met, he said eventually, you had just taken care of one of my greatest mistakes. There you were, with a very god granting you a request, and all you and Kakarote wanted was to protect the Earth they had put in danger. His smile, which hadn't really gone away, turned sardonic. I hope you'll understand when I tell you that was quite a blow to my pride. Where had I gone wrong, that 2 mortals, not even from this world, felt they had to pick up my slack? When you came to me this time, and again I could do nothing, I decided enough was enough. Helping you directly may not be precisely in my job description, but it does feel a lot more like being a guardian. Gine sat next to him, pulling Gohan into her lap and stroking his hair as she mulled that over. From where they were sitting they could see nothing but flowers and grass waving at the clouds overhead like old friends. Do you think we have a chance? She asked after a few minutes. It was several more minutes before he answered. Yes. With Kakarot and all he will have learned from King Kai, I think we stand a good chance. It wasn't the unqualified enthusiasm Gine had been hoping for, but she felt comforted anyway. If Cammy thought they had a chance, then they did, end of story. She didn't let herself wonder if a god could lie. They all felt it at the same time, looking up from what they were doing to stare at the sky. What is that? Gohan asked in a tiny voice. Gine felt her hackles raise. It's them. Already? Yamcha asked in alarm. I thought we had another day. I miscalculated, Cammy growled. I'm sorry, everyone. Not your fault, Tien said, stretching out his shoulders. One day wouldn't have made that much difference anyway. Everyone ready? They started to give their assent, and then the balance of the world tilted. Everything suddenly felt wrong, like an important piece of a block tower had been unceremoniously yanked away, leaving the rest wobbling and about to fall. What? Chi-Chi whispered, putting a hand to her mouth. Kaioshin gasped, and Gine felt her blood begin to boil. A whole city, gone in an instant. It was nothing she hadn't felt before, but this time was different. This time, those people had been sitting on the periphery of her awareness for decades, and to find them suddenly gone was like a cold spot in her soul. They've already started, she said. We have to go now, ready or not. Come on. She took to the air, slicing through it at top speed without waiting to see if the others were following. She could feel them struggling to keep up, but she didn't wait for them. How many more were the Scions going to kill before they got to them? But it turned out she didn't need to worry. About halfway to the ruined city she felt them coming directly toward her, doubtless letting their scouters guide them to the highest power level in the area. It seemed she had some amount of choice in their meeting place, so she landed at the nearest spot that looked promising, a wilderness area with flat, open ground and small hillocks. The others landed around her a minute later. Why'd you stop? Chi-Chi demanded. They're coming right for us, Tien said. This is as good a place as any to meet them. And in a few minutes two figures slowly descended from the sky, landing in front of them. The bigger one was exactly who she'd been expecting, though he'd lost all his hair in the interim. She'd seen him around, especially when she'd been running with Bardock and his crew, but they'd never exchanged words. He was powerful, but if they all fought together, not impossible to take down. They'd never get a chance to do that, though, because standing next to him was the face Gine had seen in every nightmare she'd had for the last year, Vegeta IV, Prince of the Scions. And he was staring right at her. When Gine was 5 years old, someone had challenged the king. She didn't remember his name now, something like Obear or Unio, but he'd been huge, dome-headed and hairy, and rumored to have a power level close to that of the king. Vegeta III had ascended the throne only a few years before, and this was his first challenger, so everyone had shown up to watch. At 5 years old and perpetually hungry, Gine hadn't cared much about the fighting so much as the crowd. A bunch of feasting Scions might drop quite a few crumbs that an enterprising urchin could pick up, and the crowd had been so dense that day that by the time the king entered the ring Gine had been almost full. Perhaps the lessening of her hunger was why she remembered him so clearly. Tall, straight-backed, and noble, he'd strode onto the raised platform without paying his opponent the slightest bit of attention. An attendant had taken his cape and armor, and Gine had noticed them exchange a few words that had the attendant grinning. Then the king had turned around and, without wasting any time posturing or making speeches, speared his hand straight through the challenger's chest. There was a split second of utter silence, then the deafening roar of the crowd masking the sounds of King Vegeta pulling the man's heart out of his chest, strings of gore and arteries offering little resistance. Once it was free, he held it above his head and the crowd somehow managed to roar even louder. The heart was still pulsing, dripping blood onto the king's face and down his arm. One droplet landed on the corner of his mouth and he licked it away. Oddly, Gine couldn't remember how she'd felt at the time, whether she'd been horrified, excited, or just disappointed the crowd broke up so soon. All she could remember was that she'd spent the next 2 hours dodging the other street urchins as she picked up what food remained, and that there was so much of it there had been enough and to spare for all of them. Every time she recalled it afterward, though, the memory unsettled her, a sensation that only got worse as she got older. At 5 years old she hadn't understood what was so upsetting. Violence like that was, if not routine, then nothing uncommon. When she was older, however, she realized that as the king, Vegeta represented everything a Scion was supposed to be: bloodthirsty, merciless, powerful. In other words, everything she wasn't. As she got older and the gap between where she was and where she was supposed to be only got wider and more obvious, it no longer mattered who ridiculed her. It was always the king's face she saw sneering, his voice she heard taunting her. And in her nightmares, his hand pulling her heart out of her chest in retribution for having dared be born a scion. Vegeta glanced away from Gine, his mocking smile growing marginally larger before he did, and addressed Kami. Bit far from home, aren't you, Namekian? Gine was relieved to have the prince's gaze directed elsewhere, but now that she had space to really look at him she found herself somewhat underwhelmed. He was clean-shaven, unlike his father, but the differences didn't end there. He was shorter, and his bearing was arrogant rather than noble. Mocking rather than self-assured. He seemed small, in a way that had nothing to do with his height. A schoolyard bully rather than a tyrant. His aura was massive, of course, but in every other way he was not the nightmare she'd been expecting. Kami addressed him mildly. Earth is my home. And I must kindly ask you to leave it. You are not welcome here. Vegeta's eyebrows lifted a fraction. Oh ho. Did you hear that, Nappa? We're not welcome. We've been kindly asked to leave. What do you say to that? Nappa grinned. I heard Namekians don't have bones. I wanna rip his arms off to see. Vegeta turned back to Kami, spreading his hands. How's that answer, slug? But Kami did no more than nod. Illuminating. Now, to be perfectly clear, what exactly are your intentions in coming here? You want me to be clear? Very well. Vegeta spoke slowly, enunciating his words. We are here to kill every thinking being on this planet and then sell it for profit. He glanced at Gine and Gohan. We are also here for Kakarot, his dam and his whelp. Speaking of which, where is he? Too cowardly to show up. Gohan clenched his fists. My daddy's not a coward. He's coming, and when he gets here he's going to beat you up. Turning to Gohan in mock surprise, Vegeta addressed him in a sickening version of baby speak. It does talk. And who's your mommy, little boy? Did Kakarot climb back up the family tree to have you, or did he rut with the local wildlife instead? Gine felt her tail bristle around her waist almost before the words had penetrated. She heard the others murmur invectives, but she couldn't hear them over the sound of her heart in her ears. Chi-Chi clapped her hands over Gohan's ears and shouted at Vegeta. You shut your dirty mouth or I'll shut it for you. Vegeta grinned slowly, an open-mouthed, delighted, wicked thing that made nearly everyone in the assembled group take a small step backward. And here I thought this planet might be boring. Nappa, how many Cybermen do you have left? Ha! I like the way you think, Vegeta. Let me see. Nappa held out a small bottle, giving it a shake. Looks like we've got 6. That's perfect. 1 for each of the riff-raff. You, woman. He lifted his chin at Gine. Get over here and watch the show. Bring the boy with you. Gine snarled in lieu of an answer. Vegeta didn't seem surprised. Suit yourself. Go ahead, Nappa. Gine watched helplessly as he planted the 6 seeds, watering them in turn. She could kick the bottle out of his hands and destroy the seeds before they had a chance to grow, but that was assuming Nappa didn't swat her out of the sky before she reached him. Besides, they needed to buy time for Kakarot to arrive. He'd be on his way back now, but there was no telling how long it would take him to get here. The longer Vegeta spent toying with them, the better. What are? Krillin started, but then the Cybermen began to sprout. 6 small mounds swelled the earth and then collapsed as 6 wrinkled green heads emerged from the ground with a squelching sound that made Yamcha wince. Yo! Chi-Chi shuddered and wiped her hands on her dress. Kill all of them except that one and that one, Vegeta instructed the Cybermen, pointing at Gine and Gohan. You're not to touch them, understand? The Cybermen gibbered in response, and then leapt. It was over in seconds, though it felt a lot longer, especially when everyone was moving at super speed. Gine gripped both Gohan's shoulders as the others fought. Tien took out his opponent in 2 blows. Kaioshin froze his in place, which let Chi-Chi slice through it as well as hers with her ki blade. Krillin vaporized his with a massive ki attack, and Kami dispatched his opponent with such clean efficiency that the Cyberman in question probably hadn't even noticed it was dead. Only Yamcha had any trouble. Yamcha, duck! Gine shouted as the last Cyberman, perhaps sensing it was doomed anyway, leapt at him, preparing for a kamikaze attack. Yamcha dutifully ducked, and the Cyberman sailed over him, exploding in midair. Whoa, Yamcha breathed, standing up and following the explosion trail with wide eyes. He turned to Gine and gave her a shaky thumbs up. Thanks, ma'am. TCH. Vegeta spat. Useless. What the? Nappa gaped, blinking rapidly as he looked from Earthling to Earthling, before finally turning to Vegeta in shock. I thought this planet was supposed to be full of weaklings. Vegeta was frowning thoughtfully at Gine, and did not answer his subordinate for a moment. Probably old information, he said, finally looking away from her. Looks like you'll get a chance to stretch your legs after all. Surprise quickly gave way to delight, and Nappa stepped forward, punching his open hands several times. All right. Which one of you wants to die first? Yamcha stepped forward confidently, bouncing back and forth on his toes in front of Nappa. I don't feel like I really got a chance to show my stuff in that last fight, he said. Let me soften him up for you, guys. We're fighting together, Yamcha, Tien said firmly, stepping up behind him. None of us can take him on our own. Yamcha deflated somewhat, but nodded. Nappa grinned. All at once or one at a time, doesn't make a difference to me, he laughed. Go ahead and do your little teamwork thing, see what that gets you. Like we practiced, Kami said, looking at each of them in turn, and as a single unit, all 8 of them phased out of sight. Kami, Gohan, Krillin and Kaioshin took to the air, forming a rough circle above Nappa's head. The others ranged around him on the ground in a similar fashion, Chi-Chi some distance away behind cover, Gine directly in front of Nappa. Oh dear, Vegeta called, sounding bored. They have you surrounded. Means it doesn't matter where I aim. Nappa replied gleefully. Oh, yes it does, Vegeta informed him sharply as Gine attacked. You're not to harm the woman, remember? At these words, Nappa froze, and Gine's jab landed on his jaw, twisting his head back with a loud crack. Growling, he turned and reached for her, but before he could disobey orders, Chi-Chi's energy blade whistled through the air, and Nappa swung his head around to look. Duck! Vegeta shouted, and Nappa did, the blade swinging harmlessly by him. He straightened, grinning, and didn't notice the blade coming back around until it sliced his left ear clean off, taking his scouter with it. Nappa roared and flailed angrily, unwittingly smacking Tien to the ground as he tried to take advantage of his distraction to attack. The fighters in the air began peppering Nappa with ki blasts, none strong enough to do real damage, but all strong enough to hurt. The burly scion lashed out with ki blasts of his own, most of them going wild, but one of them landed a direct hit on Krillin. Kaioshin caught him with his telekinesis and lowered his unconscious body gently to the ground, away from the battle. Krillin! Gohan screamed. Second formation. Gine called harshly, taking to the air. Gohan stayed where he was, and Gine grimaced. This was what she had been afraid of. It was one thing to catch birds in the forest to bring home for dinner, it was quite another to face down someone who was trying to kill you, and yet another still to watch your comrades fall. Gine had been frozen with fear in her first fight, too, and it was only thanks to Bardock that she was still alive today. He had been strong enough to take up her slack, and laid back enough that he didn't even rib her about it, but there was no room to take up anyone's slack here and now. Gohan needed to get his act together quickly or they were all doomed. Kami landed and called to the boy, and after a moment of hesitation, Gohan joined him. Chi-Chi joined Gine in the air and they exchanged a glance, both of them relieved Gohan hadn't frozen up. Nappa aimed a punch at Kami, who sidestepped the blow with millimeters to spare. Grabbing Nappa's arm, Kami used the Scion's momentum to throw him to the ground. This gave Gine and Chi-Chi a wide opening, Gine attacking with the massive Kamehameha she'd been building, Chi-Chi with another blade. Gine's blast hit him full on, but he reached up and punched the flat side of the blade, dissipating it in a shower of sparks. Growling in anger and frustration, Nappa leapt into the air, ready to grab Gine and Chi-Chi by their throats, but Tien and Yamcha both hit him from behind with a Wolf Fang fist and a Dadanpa. When he turned to deal with them, Kami and Gohan blasted him from the ground, allowing them to escape. Enough! Nappa roared, powering up so intensely it sent a shockwave through the battlefield. He kept his eyes on Yamcha, ignoring the shots from Gine and Tien, and swatting Chi-Chi's blade out of the air again without looking. When he reached Yamcha he grabbed him by the hair and swung him around like a sling, letting go to slam him into the side of a tall rock formation. The formation crumbled, burying Yamcha under the rubble. Damn it! Tien spat, rushing forward. Nappa grinned and let Tien hit him, then snatched his arm up in a hand so large it was nearly the length of Tien's entire forearm. Trapped, Tien could do nothing as Nappa swung around to use him as a shield against the ki blade slicing toward him. Kaioshin screamed, but Chi-Chi flung her arms wide and the blade dissipated into nothing, scattering a few glittering bits of hot ki energy that peppered Tien's skin with burns but otherwise left him unharmed. Gine had just enough time to let out a sigh of relief before Nappa shrugged, said, "Oh well," and pulled Tien's head off his shoulders. All the air felt like it had been sucked out of Gine's lungs. She blinked rapidly, trying to clear her suddenly blurry vision. Tien's neck was spurting blood, coating Nappa with it, mixing with the blood dripping from his severed ear. Distantly, she was aware that someone was screaming, but she knew it couldn't be her. She didn't have breath to scream with. Nappa tossed Tien's body into a bloody heap on the ground and turned his attention to Chi-Chi. He hadn't made it more than a few feet toward her, though, when Gohan, red in the face and yelling at the top of his lungs, slammed into him so hard he tackled him to the ground and plowed up a good-sized chunk of earth in the process. When the dust cleared, a dazed Nappa was being pummeled by a child no bigger than his foot, blood streaming from his nose. As Gine watched, Nappa shook himself, backhanded Gohan off his chest, and leapt to his feet. "I'm done playing around," he bellowed. "You weaklings are all gonna die and I'm gonna enjoy every minute of it." He swung around, looking for Gohan, but before he found him a small blur crossed the edge of Gine's vision and Nappa startled. "What the hell?" He spun in place, trying to reach something on his back. Gine saw Kaioshin, clinging to the Scion's broad shoulders with a venomous look on his tear-stained face. His ki began to spiral, a giddy, lethal feeling that Gine didn't understand. Kami, apparently, did, because he bellowed. "Kaioshin, don't. He wouldn't want you to." "I don't care." Kaioshin snarled, starting to glow. "Tien." Gine heard the boom before she saw it, a sound so loud it was a physical sensation. Then there was light, and then dust, and then nothing. No, she realized. Not nothing. Nappa. Still standing. Still grinning. Still alive. "Pathetic," he said, brushing dust off the top of his head. "Now where was I?" With a deep yell, Kami launched himself at Nappa, pounding him with such a fury of blows that the Scion was forced back. Gine joined him, the two of them fighting in perfect sync. Nappa kept yielding, taking one step back, then another, and for a moment Gine thought they had a chance. But only for a moment. Suddenly Gine felt something hard and gritty pressing on her cheek. She squinched up her face and felt sand enter her mouth. It was the ground. She was on the ground. Her head spun, and she pressed herself harder into the dirt, afraid for a moment that she was about to be flung off the surface of the planet and into space. What had happened? Slowly the thick fog of pain parted enough that she could tell there was a part of her face that hurt more than the rest of her. She'd been struck. Nappa had punched her. That was what had happened. Gritting her teeth against the pain, Gine heaved herself to her feet. A trickle of blood ran down her forehead and she swiped it away impatiently. She couldn't hear anything, couldn't see anyone, and slowly she looked around, head still throbbing. To her left was the prince, standing calmly with his arms crossed, grinning at her. Snarling, she looked away from him and found Nappa, crouched low. Was he hurt too? No, he was about to attack. But attack what? Movement caught her eye, and she found Kami on Nappa's other side, picking himself slowly up off the ground, looking as battered and bloody as she felt. He was looking in the same direction Nappa was, and in the instant Gine saw him he disappeared, phasing forward too fast for her to follow. She looked where he'd been looking, and to her horror found Gohan, face white with pain or fear, collapsed on the ground, and Chi-Chi, curled protectively around him. Before Gine could blink, or think, or move, Kami was there, arms spread wide, and Nappa's attack broke around him like water. Chi-Chi and Gohan were spared, the rushing air ruffling their hair and clothes, but no more. Kami was not so lucky. Clothes nearly burned away, body bruised and bleeding, teeth bared in triumph, Kami fell, and did not get up again. Like a sunset, Kami's body faded gradually from view, until all trace of him was completely gone. Gohan gasped in shock, and Chi-Chi began weeping, but Gine only felt numb. Kami had been in her life longer than almost anyone who wasn't family. It occurred to her now that he was family. She wished she had told him that. She wished she'd known it before now. The memory of him, smiling up at her with a flower tucked behind his ear, was almost more real to her than the blood that stained the ground where his body had been. Chi-Chi uncurled from around Gohan, tears still streaming down her face, and stood up, cupping her hands behind her. "Ka, me, ha, me, ha." She thrust her hands forward and let loose an enormous beam of light straight at Nappa, who batted it away as though it were nothing. Gine threw herself at the other Scion, intending to tackle him to the ground, but he brought his meaty fist down on her back. She slammed into the ground, the impact knocking the wind out of her. Chi-Chi sent another ki blade toward Nappa's face, but he countered it with a ki shot of his own, hitting her in the process and sending her flying. Nappa surveyed the three of them, all lying incapacitated on the ground. Gine tried desperately to suck air into her unresponsive lungs, but she couldn't. Gohan was trying to stand, but something about one of his legs wasn't working right and he kept falling down. Chi-Chi appeared to be completely unconscious. Which one first? Nappa mused to himself. He sounded calm, despite looking deranged with only one ear and his face covered in blood. His eyes landed on Chi-Chi and lit up. Ah, yes, the wildlife. Your brat's pretty strong, girly. Too bad you have to die. No one marks me like that and gets away with it. He kicked Chi-Chi until she was lying flat on her back and put his massive foot on her head. Gohan screamed. Gine punched herself in the stomach, trying to get her diaphragm working again. When it didn't, she ignored the weakness in her legs and tried to get them to bear her weight. But she knew she would be too late. Nappa raised his leg high, ready to stomp it back down on Chi-Chi's skull, and Gine called up what little ki she could muster into her palm, knowing it would accomplish nothing. Gine threw the tiny ki ball. Nappa slammed his foot down. The ki ball scattered across his back like rainwater, so weak he didn't notice. His foot made contact, but Gine heard no crunch of bone or squelch of brains. Nappa's foot had broken only rock. Chi-Chi was nowhere to be seen. Nappa lifted his leg in surprise and looked at the bottom of his foot as though the girl might be stuck to it. But Gine could feel where Chi-Chi was, and to her overwhelming joy she could feel someone else with her, Kakarot. He'd made it. Nappa finally spotted his stolen prey, and noticed the bright orange Gi next to her, but faster than thought Kakarot was gone. Gine saw him and Chi-Chi reappear almost instantaneously next to Gohan, and then the three of them were gone again. She felt him move to Krillin, then Yamcha, and then the five of them were next to her, most of them balanced on Nimbus and all but Kakarot looking worse for wear. Gine felt her diaphragm start working again and she greedily sucked in air. I only got one senzu bean, Kakarot said worriedly. But you all look pretty bad. Nothing, Yamcha croaked. Give it to Gohan. No, give it to Mom. Gohan protested. Gine smiled but shook her head. You should have it, sweetie, she said, feeling it herself but also knowing it was what Chi-Chi would say. But Kakarot frowned. I can split it in half, he said, doing so. He gave one half to Gohan, and then looked around at the others. I don't need it, Gine said quickly, standing up. I'm good, Yamcha said with difficulty, though Gine noticed he did not move to stand. You should probably give it to your wife. What's she doing here, anyway? Kakarot said as he slipped the senzu bean delicately into Chi-Chi's mouth. She trained with us. Gohan informed him. Kakarot turned to stare at him in disbelief, and missed Chi-Chi's eyes opening. Kakarot, she cried with joy, flinging her arms around him and tackling him to the ground. You came back. I'm going to kill you for leaving. I love you. I love you too, Kakarot said, lifting Chi-Chi by the waist and setting her to the side. But I gotta take care of these guys real quick. You can kill me then, okay? Real quick, he says, Nappa snorted. We got ourselves a confident one, Vegeta. Gine looked at Kakarot, really looked, and found that he had reason to be confident. He'd been strong before he left, but the person that stood before her now was like lightning on a leash. He could take out Nappa. He would be much more than an annoyance to the prince. But he was not stronger than him. Any battle they fought could only end one way, with the prince injured and humiliated, and Kakarot dead. And yet, surely Kakarot realized this too. But there he was, calmly ignoring the prince and his lackey as though they were the annoyances. It gave Gine hope that Kakarot had something up his sleeve. Vegeta seemed to sense this too, because he did not respond to Nappa's quip, only watched Kakarot carefully. Did Tien and Kaioshin not come? Kakarot asked. I would have thought they'd been here. He killed them, Gine said dully. She saw Gohan's lip tremble, and Chi-Chi's smile faded. Oh, Kakarot said faintly. Then he shook himself. Well, we can wish M back when this is all over. No, we can't, Gine said, her chest squeezing as she thought of it. Kami fought with us too. And now he's gone. All at once the earth beneath their feet began to rumble. Gine looked in surprise to find Kakarot glaring murderously at Nappa, his energy rising to dizzying heights. Dust kicked up and small pebbles rose in the air around him, the very earth responding to the force of Kakarote's anger. She heard a familiar beep and turned to find Vegeta checking Kakarote's power level with his scouter. What he saw made him frown. What the hell? Nappa demanded. Vegeta, what's his power level? Kakarote got a hold of himself, and the rocks fell to earth again. Vegeta took off his scouter and crushed it in his hand, lip curled in disgust. You don't want to know, he said. But... Gohan, Kakarote said, his eyes still on Nappa. I need you to take your mom and the others and get as far away as you can. Why yes, sir. Gohan slung Yamcha's arm over his shoulder and Chi-Chi lifted Krillin in her arms. Give him hell, honey, Chi-Chi said savagely, before flying away. The second they were out of sight, Kakarote shot forward so fast Gine lost track of him. Nappa did as well, and he looked as surprised as Gine felt when he gave a choking gasp and fell forward, landing heavily on the ground. Behind him was Kakarote, fist still extended. He lowered it, and looked down at the groaning heap in front of him with pitiless eyes. I hope Cammy and the others forgive me for not killing you, he said coldly. Nappa was twitching, breathing in short, shallow breaths, but he did not get up. Gine looked closer and realized there was a fist-sized indentation in the middle of his spine. Kakarote's fury was a palpable thing, and it gave Gine chills. It quickly passed, though, as Kakarote met her eyes and grinned nervously. Sorry, Ma, he said sheepishly. I shoulda asked if you wanted a turn. Viva Vegeta. Nappa wheezed. Help, me. Kakarote picked up Nappa by his armor and tossed him at Vegeta's feet. If you go now, I won't stop you, he said. The prince glanced down at his minion like there was something on his shoe. After a moment he took Nappa's hand. Thank you. Nappa sighed, but then Vegeta grinned nastily and flung him into the air, sending a ki blast after him that disintegrated him completely. Kakarote grunted in shock, his mouth falling open. Gine could not say she had expected it either. For all that she had spent the last year hammering home how nasty Science could be, she had forgotten that even they had lines they didn't cross. This was one of them. Nappa deserved to have the ribbing of his life at the mess hall later, definitely a humiliating nickname that would follow him around forever, and probably be shunned by his former teammates who would be embarrassed to be seen with him. But he also deserved a ride to a healing tank. At the very least, it would be pure madness to waste a Zenkai like that. But the prince was mad, she realized. He was grinning up at the dissipating smoke overhead like he'd just done something amusing instead of something so monstrous even a scion would be horrified. He was mad, and small, and not worthy of existential dread. He might be strong enough to kill her, Gine realized. But that was all. There was nothing else to be afraid of, and right now, with her son standing there so strong and tall, Gine didn't even feel afraid of that. Vegeta lowered his gaze, still grinning lazily, and opened his mouth to speak. So this is Kakarote. Vegeta smirked. Raditz undersold you quite a bit, you know. He told us he was the stronger brother, but then, he always was a liar as well as a weakling. You must take after your father. His gaze switched to Gine. I can see Raditz takes after you. Gine snarled. Don't be like that. The prince gave her an oily smile. Finding a female changes everything. We three might not be able to take out our next target on our own, but think what a passel of brats with royal blood in them could do. He leered at Gine, his tail waving behind him in a gesture that was the exact middle ground between an invitation to mate and a threat of imminent violence. What do you say? Want to be queen? Gine returned the gesture with one too obscene for words. Vegeta laughed. That's probably for the best, he chuckled. Who knows what I'd catch rutting with a low-class kitchen wench. I bet my dick would turn black and fall off before we even. Gine shot forward, punching Vegeta hard in the mouth. The prince staggered and almost fell. Kakarote took the opportunity to rush in with a hit of his own, knocking him over entirely. Before they could press their advantage, Vegeta flipped to his feet and struck back. They both went down like a sack of rocks. The amount of power on display even in that short jab was nothing short of horrifying. But Gine was satisfied. Vegeta was no longer smiling. The prince gingerly touched his glove to his face and it came away red. Ha ha. It was a deranged chuckle, more fury than mirth. He seemed transfixed by the smudge of red on his glove. You caught me off guard. Ha ha ha. You should be proud, wench. You're the first person to draw my blood in a long, long time. His eyes were wide and unfocused. His hand, still in front of his face, was trembling. Gine could imagine him piercing her chest with that hand, adding her blood to his own. The trembling could have been from bloodlust, the eagerness for battle any proper scion would be feeling at this moment. But it wasn't. Gine hopped to her feet, ignoring the bruise forming on top of the one Nappa had given her. Vegeta wasn't trembling from bloodlust. The king would have been, she was certain, but his son was trembling from outrage. Horror. Fear. Kakarot got to his feet as well, and together they attacked. They had a slight advantage, at first. The two of them had been sparring together since Kakarot was a little boy, and even after a year apart they knew how the other moved like an extension of themselves. A single opponent, even one this powerful, found it difficult to split his attention two ways. But Vegeta was not the prince for nothing, and soon he calmed down and realized he could more or less ignore Gine's attacks. He hadn't been wrong, her punch had caught him off guard, and once he got his guard back up Gine didn't deliver another devastating blow. Even so, she kept fighting. Kakarot was strong, but he wasn't on Vegeta's level. If her presence could help even a little, she was going to stay. Besides, Gine no longer cared about winning or losing. She wanted to hurt Vegeta. Even if it killed her. Tired of Gine's distracting attacks, Vegeta found an opening in Kakarot's constant barrage and shot a massive ki blast in Gine's direction. It was too fast to dodge and too large to take. It might not kill her outright, but it would certainly remove her from the fight. Gine braced herself, only sorry she hadn't been able to save more of her friends. But before the blast could reach her, something surged through her awareness like lightning, and in front of her, between one blink and the next, was Kakarot, burying his fist in Vegeta's stomach. The beam went wild, searing through several mountains but missing Gine. Vegeta doubled over and spat up blood. With more power and speed than he'd possessed just moments before, Kakarot brought both fists down on the back of the prince's head and slammed him into the ground. Blood pooled under Vegeta's body, and when he groggily picked himself up he spat out several teeth. Wah! Gine echoed the prince's sentiments. What the hell was that, Kakarot? Her son flashed her a grin. Just a little something I learned from King Kai. Gine gaped, still unable to understand what she had seen. Why didn't you do that sooner? Kakarot went solemn. If I ain't careful all that ki can turn back on me and explode. King Kai said I shouldn't go more than twice my normal power, and I can't do it for long. Twice his own power. Gine marveled. Her son was already strong enough to qualify for elite class, but to be able to double it at will. Filth. Vegeta spat venomously. He staggered to his feet, clutching his stomach, and spat out more teeth. How dare you? I am the prince. I am above you. Learn your place. He sprang at Kakarot, grabbing the sides of his head and kneeing him in the face. Blood fountained out of Kakarot's nose, but before the droplets could even hit the ground his power surged again. Still in Vegeta's hold he reached up and grabbed the prince by his ears, pulling his face down violently to meet the solid rock of Kakarot's head. Vegeta staggered back, his nose now also gushing blood. Still surging, Kakarot kicked him in the chest. Vegeta winced, but grabbed Kakarot's leg and twisted, sending him spinning to land on the ground. Not bothering to get back up, Kakarot kicked Vegeta's legs out from under him. Both now on the ground, they grappled, tumbling over and over as first Kakarot had the upper hand, then Vegeta, then Kakarot again. Gine could do nothing but wipe the sweat out of her eyes and feel useless. At last Vegeta kicked Kakarot away from him and sprang to his feet. Kakarot's surge had ended and he got to his feet slowly, breathing hard. Both of them were covered in blood and bruises. They were an even match, leaning toward Kakarot's favor when he doubled his power. It was unreal for Gine to think that a child she had born could go toe-to-toe with a member of the royal family, even if only for moments at a time. A tiny thread of hope began to worm its way through her body. Vegeta wiped the blood from his face and flung it from his fingers. He no longer looked quite sane. This isn't happening, he muttered to the ground. I'm the prince. I'm the prince, damn you. He looked up and fixed Gine with a look of pure hate. If you really love this pathetic mudball that much, go ahead and die with it. With a growl he launched himself into the air, bringing his hands together at his side. No! Gine screamed. Without waiting for Kakarot, she cupped her hands together and charged a Kamehameha. Useless though it was, she refused to do nothing while the second planet she'd called home was incinerated beneath her feet. Beside her, Kakarot charged a Kamehameha of his own, dwarfing hers. He surged, his power doubling once again, and out of the corner of her eye Gine could see the sweat pouring down his face. Above them Vegeta was shouting something. They couldn't make out the words, but Gine could feel his desperation giving him power. He wouldn't succeed in destroying the planet, they had at least done that. But he was only going to come back, angrier and ready for more. Somehow Kakarote's power doubled again, and a stab of worry made Gine's ki falter for a moment. What had he said? His own ki might turn back on him and explode? And yet this added power was still not enough. Their attacks were pushing Vegeta back slowly, an inch at a time, a defeat, but a survivable one. Even still, Gine couldn't bring herself to hope that Kakarote had more in him to give, not if it meant his death. Beside her she heard Kakarote give a deep grunt and mutter through his teeth. Kaioken times 4. It was like standing in the middle of a hurricane. Kakarote's energy exploded into something her mind refused to comprehend, more a force of nature than something coming from a person. Wind howled in a vortex with them at the center, the negative air pressure sucking the breath out of Gine's lungs. She was forced to squeeze her eyes shut against the sheer force of it. So she felt, rather than saw, the prince falter, redouble his efforts, then give way entirely. Gine lowered her arms, breathing hard. The wind, and Vegeta's energy, faded away, leaving a loud silence. Grinning in disbelief and triumph, Gine turned to Kakarote just in time to see him lower his arms, smile back at her, and collapse. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.